Something going on in your life that you can't handle? Something you find strange or frightening? That's okay. It happens to all of us. From time to time. And chances are, it's someone else's fault. No, I'm not a psychic and I'm not stalking you. You see, this kind of thing happens all the time to Apron Janes and Six-Pack Joes all over the world. Even me, Dr. Glick Stone. You see, there is something you can do about it. I'm going to help you out with a few easy steps to get your life back from all those people who endeavor to hurt you. No, I'm not talking about weapons or even the ancient oriental martial arts like Kung Fu. No, nothing like that. What I'm going to show you today is much more useful and effective than any of these things. What am I going to tell you about? It's the passive-aggressive letter.
Gosh, mister! Hi, Dr. Glick Stone. What's a passive-aggressive letter?
Well, little Jimmy, I'm glad you asked. You see, little Jimmy, sometimes people do things we don't like. It can be something like borrowing our possessions without asking, not doing chores or cleaning up after oneself. You see, all of these things can cause a lot of problems for a person. That's where the passive-aggressive letter comes into play.
Golly, how?
Whoa, little Jimmy. Don't get ahead of yourself. You see, little Jimmy, the passive-aggressive letter was invented in Seattle, Washington.
Where is that?
Way up in the Pacific Northwest of these here fine United States of America. And if it was invented in America...
then that's what Jesus would do.
You got that right, little Jimmy.
But Dr. Glickstone, when someone does something I don't like, I usually talk to them about it. Isn't that the right thing to do?
Absolutely not, little Jimmy. Absolutely not. If you watch your local television news, you know that people are dangerous. If you try to tell someone that they might do something that you didn't like, they might try to hurt you, or even worse. Take, for instance, the story of Maggie McDougal. You may remember this story in the headlines a few months back. She was a normal housewife in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There was nothing she loved more than making sure her husband had a hot meal when he came home from one of America's great paper mills. But when her new neighbors moved in, they turned out to be a noisy group. Mrs. McDougal went next door to complain. That night, her husband, Mr. McDougal, came home and noticed his dinner wasn't on the table. His wife was missing. 3 days later, the tip of her pinky was found floating off the coast of Lake Superior. You see, little Jimmy, had she just written a passive-aggressive note, Mr. McDougal would have had his dinner.
Golly, Dr. Glickstone, it sounds like passive-aggressive letters are the way to go.
You got that right, little Jimmy. We can trust the power of the passive-aggressive letter not only because of the countless examples of its efficacy, but because of where it was invented in the first place. Little Jimmy, do you know where cars come from?
Well, Detroit.
And movies?
Hollywood.
And what about those fine cheesesteak sandwiches?
Philadelphia.
You got that right. Those are the things that make America famous and obviously superior. Like many of those cities and famous things they produce, Seattle produces top-notch passive-aggressiveness.
But Dr. Glickstone, my mother says that Seattle's is for lager, fishermen, and whores.
No, little Jimmy. She's almost right, though. She's talking about Portland. Seattle is a bright city of industry and commerce. If you take a good look at that city, you'll see everything looks like the future. In fact, there isn't a single thing there from before 1952, and will surely be a place of pleasure and retirement for many of our astro men.
Wow, Dr. Glickstone, Seattle sounds like a swell place.
And how? But let's try to stay on track. The first step to writing your very own passive-aggressive letter is to suspend logic.
Golly, that sounds complicated.
It's not complicated at all. Suspending logic means that you don't ask any questions, ever. You just accept that you have been bothered by something.
Okay.
Take, for instance, someone is parking in a parking spot. Sounds simple. But if you were bothered by it, you'd suspend logic, that it's a parking space that's made to park a car in. We'll talk more about that specific case later.
Oh, I think I get it. So if I had a friend at school who sits at a lunch table that I might want to sit at sometime, but I don't know when I might want to sit there, I could be upset about that even though there are lunch tables that are made for anyone to sit at during lunch.
Now you're getting it.
And doing that is suspending logic.
Absolutely. Logically, those seats are for anyone to use. When you suspend logic, you choose to be upset about that little bit of logic.
Golly, Dr. Glick Stone, what happens next?
Whoa, 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 little Jimmy. Don't get carried away. Remember, suspend logic. You suspend that logic as far as it'll go.
I think I'm going to start that letter to Sammy Kirschrum right now.